Okay, an intro.
Yep.
Okay. And mic-wise, it's going to be good enough?
Yeah, we're good.
We shut the door then.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome to Facebook Live. Lori Wallach here, Director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. Welcome to my office in Washington, D.C. Today I wanted to talk to you about what the heck is going on with these steel and aluminum tariffs, because there seems to be a lot of confusion. So here's the backstory. There's been a problem that is called oversupply. Some countries are subsidizing steel and aluminum, and they're making a lot more stuff than there's demand in the global market. And some countries are particularly notorious for this. China's very notorious, Russia, Korea. And so a lot of countries are having dumped, sold into their markets at lower than the cost of actual production, a bunch of steel we don't need. And what's ended up happening as a result is U.S. workers are basically losing their jobs. These companies are getting clobbered, not because they're inefficient or they're not doing a good job, but because basically there's been a trade war that kind of got started on us with a bunch of countries chucking extra stuff at us, and we're not doing anything about it. It's such a big honking problem that there's actually been global meetings on trying to talk down the problem of the oversupply, but nothing's changed. And this, by the way, has been going on for decades, because second question is this a big honking deal? It's not, actually, really, kind of. Because, for instance, in 2002, the last time that a president sort of had the basta moment and said, that's it, we're stopping this stuff for a couple of months to make clear to the rest of those countries that are cheating that we're not going to be the market of last resort forever. Last time that happened was in 2002, and it was free trader George W. Bush. And he put up 30% tariffs. Right now, what President Trump is talking about is 25% tariffs on steel and 10% on aluminum. And Bush's 30% tariffs on steel were around for about 18 months. And it did kind of whack the supply back. I mean, it sent a signal to those other countries that was basically, well, you guys can continue to put your subsidies out there and make more of that than we're going to need. But then you're going to end up trying to find someplace else to sell or dump it in the ocean for all we care, because we're not going to just let it come in. This is not super technical. It's not like it's like some new Wakanda super shield against steel dumping. This is just good old trade law. Now, here's the thing, though. Because a lot of pundits have been looking to pick a fight with Trump over trade and have been looking to declare that he started a trade war, there's a lot of screaming that this is going to be a big trade war. What ends up happening, basically, is a country that doesn't like what we're doing goes to the World Trade Organization and says we shouldn't do it. And then they have a hearing, and then they decide if we should or shouldn't do it. Bush's sanctions against trade, against steel, finally were ruled WTO legal, and you got rid of them. That's all sort of a sideshow. So everyone see the movie Up. One of the funniest things in that movie Up, I think, is where the dog who's totally on mission gets totally distracted whenever there's squirrel. And to some degree, this is like squirrel, because the damn thing we should all be paying attention to is whether or not Trump is actually going to follow through on those promises that got the man elected, which is he promised he was going to redo our total trade policies, a total new approach to China trade, where we had almost a half a $1 trillion trade deficit last year, a rewrite of NAFTA to create a new model for U.S. trade agreements, to get rid of the outsourcing incentives and corporate tribunals at the heart of those agreements, and to put in labor standards to bring up wages for workers in all the partner countries. That's the real damn deal. So in a certain way, this is all a big bunch of distraction about a kind of practice, technically it's called a trade enforcement action, where importantly he's trying to fix with this instrument. It's temporary. These are not tariffs forever. It's a trade 2x4 policy tool. He's trying to fix something that is a serious problem and for which hundreds of thousands of people have lost their jobs, and it's rotten and it can be turned around. Fine. Go fix that. However, that does not a new trade policy make. That does not the end of the promise, Trump promised end of job outsourcing or higher wages make. And so the real thing we need to be focused on is there going to be a comprehensive new approach to China trade? Are we going to see a renegotiated NAFTA that takes out the outsourcing incentives at the heart of NAFTA and that inserts labor and environmental standards, strong ones, with swift and certain enforcement to bring up wages in all the NAFTA countries. That kind of agreement could be the model of how you can get the benefits of expanded trade and the benefits spread widely to people and the planet, not just to a handful of big companies that are right now exploiting these rules that they cooked up, these rigged rules, behind closed doors. So the real issue I would basically suggest everyone pay attention to and get involved in, and there are lots of ways to do it, is to actually keep the heat on the administration to do what they actually promised, and don't get distracted by squirrel, steel and aluminum tariffs. Now again, worth watching what happens. The way that they announced it was to say klutzy would be an embarrassment to the use of that word. However, the real piece of business that you can get involved in is how to make sure NAFTA gets renegotiated in a way that we finally get a new way of doing trade deals. And the way to do that, one super important way you can get involved is, please go to the www.replacenafta.org website. That's replacenafta.org. You can get all the materials and fact sheets, what NAFTA has done in your particular state. You can find out the 930,000 specific American jobs lost to NAFTA, certified by the U.S. government, just under one narrow set of criteria. On our website, again, replacenafta.org, you can get the data on what happened in your state, but also you can connect to other people who actually are working on this to make sure that first we get the right kind of NAFTA negotiation so the replacement happens. There have been 7 rounds of talks. That started, if you keep in mind, in August. So it's kind of getting dragged out. If we don't keep the heat on this process to get the kind of agreement we want, you've got all these corporations meddling around the side just dying to get it redirected. The unbelievable thing is right now, some of the demands that we've been making for the last 20 years and Democrats in Congress have made are actually on the table. The trade negotiator for Trump is a guy who agrees on some of these big line items about NAFTA reform, getting rid of the outsourcing incentives, getting rid of the ban on buy local and buy American, getting rid of the investor state tribunals, where tens of thousands of corporations are empowered to attack our laws in front of tribunals of 3 corporate lawyers who can order unlimited sums to be paid by us taxpayers for any law or court ruling or government decision the companies think violates their big NAFTA privileges. So fixing a bunch of that stuff and then adding in the missing labor and environmental standards, that's what we need to make sure happens in negotiations. And then, second thing, and again, replacenafta.org. Go to the website. Gives you the ideas of how to do this. We need to make sure our members of Congress know we're watching the negotiations and we want them to watch the negotiations. And one of the most effective things any citizen can do, and any citizen can do this, is to go find the member of Congress when they're at a town hall, when they're cutting a ribbon for a mall, when they're having open office hours, coffee time, visiting a senior center. Politely go offer your hand, introduce yourself, explain your constituent. Don't let go of their hand until they answer your question. And your question should be, Congresswoman, Congressman, what are you going to do to make sure the NAFTA renegotiations get rid of the outsourcing incentives, the ISDS tribunals, and include strong labor and environmental standards? And will you promise me you won't vote for any deal that doesn't do that? If we all do that together and we raise up the real meat and potatoes of how we fix our failed trade policy, we're going to actually end up in a much better situation for people not just here, but when it comes to NAFTA in Mexico and Canada too. And that's what this is really about. It's about if we're going to organize people power, even though it seems a little peculiar, this administration, think it like a jiu-jitsu move. We're actually going to maybe be able to fix some of the things in NAFTA that we've been fighting against for a long time, but only if we do it together.